All right, Joe, we've got another presentation in front of us, two more, and then a break, I believe. So who do we have next?
Alessia Giacone is currently a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Humanities at the University of Pavia. She obtained her PhD in joint supervision from the Universities of Padua and Paris 1 Pantheon-Sorbonne, with a dissertation on Hegel's interpretation of Aristotle in the Doctrine of Essence. Her current research focuses on the contemporary reworkings of the ancient Greek dynamical ontology, with a special emphasis on Whitehead's process metaphysics. She is the author of many scientific articles and of a monograph on Hegel and Aristotle. And her paper today is The Path to Understanding Relation and Solidarity in Whitehead's Metaphysics.
Thank you, Joe, for introducing me. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. The purpose of my talk today is to discuss in what sense the Harvard Lectures of 1925-1927 can shed light on Whitehead's understanding of solidarity. I will particularly consider the fall semester 1926 and the seminars held that same year. I would like to underline that this choice is not fortuitous. In fact, from 1926 onward, after the lower lectures that will become Religion in the Making, Whitehead starts discussing explicitly about solidarity, and he begins to employ precisely this word to express what it means. We know that the idea of solidarity was in Whitehead's mind well before 1926. In a footnote to Process and Reality, Whitehead reports that the word solidarity comes from the speech Weldon Kirk gave at the Aristotelian Society in 1917, titled The Interaction of Body and Mind. In addition, we have evidence that the issue is already at stake in the 1920s book, especially in the concept of nature. During the Harvard Lectures, however, Whitehead stresses and radicalizes this notion. Solidarity becomes a step-by-step metaphysical thesis, which we will find almost in the same form in Process and Reality. My contention is that Whitehead derives the concept of solidarity by extension and metaphysical generalization from the matching moral one. In the slides here, I tried to lay out the movement we may get, bearing in mind that Whitehead's attitude towards philosophy has predominantly ontological concerns. There are a few clarifications needed, so let me deal with this specific point. The moral sense of solidarity seems to correspond, according to me, with that attention to the concrete Whitehead attempts to establish, being a somewhat simple thing to experience. In connection with this, I would like to argue that Whitehead's remarks on the concept of value and quality in Religion in the Making plays a key role. And in order to conclude these introductory remarks, we can briefly dwell on a terminological relief. One can employ, as Whitehead does, the adjective solid in several senses. Solid is something firm, but it can also be used as a kind of thing that is continuous and with no interruption. Hence, we can deduce that solid expresses inclusivity, but also that interrelationship, named the connectedness or togetherness of everything in Whitehead's language. So the social nature which the universe displays and that enables us to be moral beings is a consequence of the universal metaphysical law of solidarity. Nevertheless, it is due to this metaphysical law that every process of understanding may occur. I'm sharing now a very quick sketch of the contents of my contribution today. So let's get to the heart of our subject. In Science and the Modern World, with the first book given to the press at Harvard, Whitehead has already outlined this philosophy of organism. It consists of a theory of events understood as unrepeatable occasion. Each event or occasion is connected to others by internal relations, and this connection is the ultimate background of solidarity. We can find an echo of this cosmic order in the phenomenological observation about human search for meaning noted down in Religion in the Making. Consistent with Whitehead's appeal to knowledge, the leading remarks in the 1926 Lowell Lectures are about the way we relate immediately to the world and our power of experiencing. Whitehead argues that we must have such immediate contact. Indeed, it has to serve as a starting point for any future metaphysical generalization. The concreteness of experience is at once both an immediate fact and a transcendent revelation of the ground of value, roughly speaking, the word itself. To Whitehead, religion is not a social fact. It is rather related to everyone's solitariness. However, religion in the making stresses several aspects of Whitehead's beliefs about reality as a structure of interconnection. These connections are conceived here in terms of value. In particular, we see that religion is grounded on the concurrence of three allied concepts or three levels of value. First, the value of an individual for itself. Second, the value of the various individuals of the world for each other, meaning the fundamental metaphysical interrelatedness of all things. And third, the value of the objective world conceived as the community which results from the interrelations of individuals. Now, if the individual has value in itself, and if its interrelationship with the rest of the world is objective in nature, the world must have an intrinsic value too. In this sense, Whitehead can conclude that religion is world loyalty. Such an idea passes through Whitehead's critique of the notion of individual substance. Individual substance shall be, according to the standard philosophical view, something that requires nothing but itself in order to exist. Whitehead points out that there is no entity, not even God, which complies with these ontological criteria. Conversely, he asserts that, and I quote from Religion in the Making, every entity is in its sense, in its essence, social and requires society in order to exist. In fact, the society for each entity is the all-inclusive universe. End of the quote. We can move on at this point to the text of the Harvard lecture. I already mentioned how during these discourses, Whitehead radicalizes his view on solidarity, and solidarity turns into a metaphysical thesis. Whitehead himself becomes aware of the fact, since on the 4th of November 1926, his students shall record there are 6 main metaphysical principles, the first of which is exactly solidarity. The other 5 principles are in pale gray, since I'm not going to discuss them. This principle affirms that every actual entity requires all other entities in order to exist. And we can notice it is almost a verbatim to Religion in the Making. Taking this principle seriously implies the rejection of the notion of individual substance, as I said before. It follows as a result that solidarity has to apply to all actualities, and including God. I would like to stress once more that in the fall semester 1926, precisely on October the 26th, Whitehead mentioned the word solidarity for the very first time. The issue of value Whitehead dealt with in Religion in the Making returns here overwhelmingly, although the starting remarks are here of logical nature. Following Conger's notes, Whitehead argues that about the logical side of the notion of individual substance, I mean the subject-predicate form of proposition. Individual substance implies an atomic proposition that can express it, and vice versa. The aim is showing its inadequacy. Accepting that means we are simply going to accept a weak metaphysics. Solidarity of the universe rather requires that every proposition has to refer to the general background, the texture where all the elements in the universe are reciprocally interwoven. By considering the proposition Socrates is mortal, Whitehead denies that there may be a defined metaphysical fact under the verb is. According to what Conger captured from Whitehead, the fact that if Socrates dies to be buried should warn that there is something more. The immediate reference here is to Francis Bradley's theory of the all-embracing reality as the final subject of every proposition. In fact, the aftermath to this argument affirms that the whole spatio-temporal universe enters into Socrates is mortal. There are much more than 2 terms occurring in that claim, and only the true connectedness of the universe can provide the coherence of this proposition. But Whitehead combines here Bradley's theory with his own concerns, showing that it is not just a matter of logical coherence. Especially referring to that, I'm convinced that Whitehead has here in mind his previous remarks on value carried out in Religion in the Making. The grave is then both a matter of moral habits and a metaphysical criterion. In perishing, we know actual entities acquire a kind of immortality while they lose subjective immediacy, and thereby they offer what is left to themselves to the future. On the same day, Whitehead declares programmatically to his students the problem every solid metaphysics is forced to face. I quote, construing a solidarity of the universe in a sense which makes it consistent with the individual independence of its real entity. If you forget there is a multiplicity of real entities and at the same time a solidarity, which is what you mean by the real world, you fall into trap. End of quote. Reading between the lines, I think this is exactly the problem it aims to overcome in building its cosmology.
Alessia?
See? Yes.
For some reason, the microphone is having a little bit trouble picking you up. I'm not sure if it's that you're turning slightly or not, but it actually, when you're leaning a little bit farther away, it's a better audio quality, I think. So anyway, I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about it. I just wanted to alert you to the audio quality was kind of coming in and out.
Can you hear me?
Yes, let's try that. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, okay. Now, speaking about solidarity, we bring the emphasis several times on a multiplicity of entities, which Whitehead refers to as events. In fact, the leading view among process scholars consider Whitehead a pluralistic thinker. This seems strongly confirmed by the text, given that Whitehead defines his philosophy as a theory of monism. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that Whitehead was equally intrigued by monistic systems, since every solid monism has to show the unity and solidarity proper to our world. What Whitehead approaches to a monistic viewpoint is the failure in giving reason for the equally evident plurality of what exists. But I would like to suggest.
I think, Alessia, the problem is that your script is in the opposite direction as your microphone. So I think you're talking in the, away from the mics. I think it might be the issue.
Is better now? No.
Say that again. Let's try.
Well, I would like to suggest, if we consider soul reality as a pattern and as a pattern of relationship, we are faced with only one entity, like an organism of organism. I attain this idea by comparing Whitehead's notion of solidarity to Spinoza's unique substance, or even more, the actual reality we find at a stage of.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not working.
Okay, try again.
Oh, that sounds lots better. Yay! All right, well,
I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. Thanks for your patience and persistence. So I think that will make a huge difference. Thanks.
Okay. I have to clarify this point that I'm going to approach Hegel and his proximity to Whitehead just theoretically. We know from Whitehead's autobiographical notes that unfortunately he never read Hegel's text. But even so, the two thinkers are remarkably similar in their philosophical purpose. They both outline a kind of relational ontology, and both their systems are a whole in relation with its part. We can reach, moreover, this useful analogy through Whitehead's admission when it takes into account Spinoza in Science in the Modern World. I quote, "Is one substance is for me the one underlying activity of realization, individualizing itself in an interlocked plurality of modes." End of the quote. And it is easy to note that Whitehead borrows Spinoza's mode to indicate his events. He goes on, I quote again, "Each event is an individual matter of fact issuing from an individualization of the substrate activity. But individualization does not mean substantial independence." End of the quote. This is to say that substance and modes have to preserve a certain kind of reciprocity, meaning the solidarity we are own to. We can sum up saying that the attractiveness Whitehead finds in Spinoza is to be sought in the consistency with which he fights against Cartesianism through the notion of only one substance. In connection with this issue, I think it could be useful to recall Hegel's interpretation of Spinoza. According to Hegel, Spinoza's substance has a structural deficiency since it is not able in Hegelian terms to turn back in itself through reflection. This is what Hegel scholars know well as the misunderstanding of the mode. By detaching from substance, modes are more and more ontologically poorer, and conversely, substance disperses itself through them. Hegel develops the notion of actuality as a solution to this impasse. I would like to stress that Wirklichkeit is in German, and according to Hegel too, first of all, something that can act. The relationship between substance and modes, Hegel seems to suggest, has to be patched up. The approach should be both top-down and bottom-up, be bidirectional. In this sense, modes are to be conceived like the expression of substance's reflection, or in other words, like its manifestation. Hegel uses a series of reflexive metaphors in order to indicate the progressive empowerment of the substance, turning back, reflection, reciprocity. All these steps together transform substance into a living subject, able to exist in and for itself, to know itself as substance, and mainly to be causa sui. And this is exactly substance in Hegel's reinterpretation of actuality, Wirklichkeit. So, from the pure being of the beginning, which allowed to define the koinonia of being, the universal being of all that exists, we gain up at the end of the objective logic, the rational structure of the universe, a multi-layered network of entities linked to one another. Now, both Hegel's actuality and Whitehead's solidarity are nothing but the whole of all actual things. The schema of freedom grounded on the interplay between actuality and this creative activity or efficiency, not least the cogent texture of reality conceived in its interconnection. The other lecture we have now at our disposal seems to confirm that it also makes sense within a Whiteheadian perspective. A passage from Roethlisberger's notes reported between brackets a very essential synthesis. So we learned that the process is the addition of structure and passing. Solidarity, just like Wirklichkeit, is the texture of structure of reality, the cogent pattern on which creativity and freedom may grow. And I have to recall at this point one of Hegel's most beautiful definition of freedom, that is just being oneself with another. In this sense, it is the way in which process can perpetually realize itself. So, thinking in depth, solidarity is to conceive it like a solid one which links many uniqueness expressed in a sole concrescence of the universe. As Whitehead points out in Adventure of Ideas, I quote, the word concrescence is derivative from the familiar Latin verb meaning growing together. Thus, concrescence is useful to convey the notion of many things acquiring complete, complex unity. End of the quote. We have claimed several times that creativity is somehow related to solidarity. It is worth now briefly trying to clarify the nature of this connection. In the Harvard lectures, fall semester 1926, creativity is said to be a general fact. One should not intend in terms of a created entity. To echo Hegel's language, each entity is a moment of the general creativity, or in Whitehead's account, the individualization of the character of creativity. In its nature, creativity embodies all other individualization. And in fact, during the seminar in Metaphysics in the same period, we find the formulation of creativity as principium individuationis. There is thus an analogy Whitehead asserts many times with Aristotle's Eule, and since matter is extension, with Plato's Cora. Actual entities are then, we could say, reciprocal self-creation. And if this definition could seem oxymoric, we can follow the less brilliant overview, according to which each event is, I quote from the fold, inseparably the objectification of one prehension and the subjectification of another. End of the quote. Subject and object are to be conceived then perspectively, and always with a reference to the general context of the word. Through a veritable ontologization of experience, Whitehead states that occasions are made of experience in both senses of their own and others. This interchange is the play of the word itself, since, as Whitehead makes clear in Process and Reality, each actual entity is a mode of housing the word. So what at first sight may seem a baffling antithetical relation, a definition we can find in Modes of Thought, it is then actually the power every entity has to continuously reshape the world. Creativity is then the endless production of new synthesis through the act of making experience. Hence, making experience is the first and necessary step to the process of our understanding. We should turn once again to the Harvard courses to find that the tests of metaphysics are coherence and adequacy, and that under the latter, we can reach epistemology. The starting point is what is immediately known. An individual experience always starts from the limited perspective of the here and now. But every understanding of an immediate brute fact necessarily requires its metaphysical interpretation as an item in the world, which must have a systematical relation with it.
About 3 minutes.
Okay. So the how of the process corresponds to the how of our conceptual functioning that expresses the function of our relation to the world. In opposition to Kant, according to whom perspectivity is mental, Whitehead considers that the process of knowing, I quote, ought to be something general of which we are only particular modes. It means that the process of knowing itself is supposed to be intended in an ontological sense, and the reference is again to Spinoza. Then another suggestion, whereas to Hegel, the structure of the world has to overlap with the structure of thinking. In Whitehead's view, since we are part of the solidarity of the world, and since we are the world itself in its emergence, our understanding must reflect that solidarity. So, understanding is a path, in Whitehead's suggestion, an adventure, which starts from the stubborn experiencing fact to derive the metaphysical law of the solidarity of the universe. We can then suggest that understanding is to see things connected to each other, explaining each other, and especially implying each other, and so disclosing that connection of connections we refer to as the world. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Let's give her all a hand. It's always stressful to be presenting on Zoom and then you have technical issues. You handled it beautifully. So thank you for sharing your ideas. And I'm excited that, Joe did a great job of crafting the schedule, as you can all tell, because George Lucas is coming next, and his work has been historically on Whitehead and Hegel as well. And so this will be excellent combination of papers. So who would like to jump into the conversation first here? I'm sure that George is restraining himself unnecessarily. George, would you like to jump in?
All right. First, I want to say thank you, Alessia, for this careful attention to substance as subject in Hegel, which minds so much of what an actual occasion, in the way in which an actual occasion mirrors its world and is a place for the world in Whitehead's language. I wonder if it has crossed your mind to be curious about why Whitehead himself was so, given his kind of broad-ranging use of the history of philosophy, of modern philosophy, why Hegel and even the science of logic, which Whitehead criticizes as being sort of nonsensical, why he adopted these views when we see, being, nothing, becoming, in as the principal triad in science of logic, and so many other ways in which Hegel, apart from actual evolution, is a precursor of Whitehead's own view of the subjective nature or superjective nature of ontology itself. That question makes it, is that something you can comment on?
Yes, I think that there are a lot of similarity, and that actually we have to consider the science of logic in continuity also with the phenomenology of spirit, and that this kind of reworking could be interesting in the comparison, in the theoretically comparing, as I precised with Whitehead. So the kind of philosophy is in fact very different, but I think that the gesture of Hegel, of both Hegel and Whitehead, is very similar, and it's really a pity that Whitehead, as we know, never read Hegel. There are a lot of interesting point of contact, and for example, the use that both do of the history of philosophy, both in process and reality, but also in the Harvard lectures. It seems to me that Whitehead is going to construct his own philosophy through the interaction with other philosophical position. That is the same that Hegel does in his, for example, on the lecture on the history of philosophy. Some suggestions I'm still working about.
Any others want to jump in? Yes, please, Maria Regina.
Thank you very much, Alessia. I was wondering why you emphasizes the moral idea of solidarity, because I never thought about it actually, but I always thought that solidarity was connected to, let's say, Whitehead pluralism. So this emphasis on the fact that actual entity cannot reduce to one another, and so we need to think the universe as one, but there is a togetherness of things, of occasions that we cannot reduce. So one occasion cannot reduce to the other. So why do you think that is important in moral aspect of solidarity?
Question. The first one, so I have this idea through comparing the lectures of fall semester, as I said, 1926, and what we can find in Religion in the Making, and so the notion of value, and also the suggestion empowered in reading the seminar on social ethics at the end of the Harvard lectures. So I found that kind of movement and the idea, the suggestion that Whitehead could start from the moral sense of solidarity, in the sense of the simple, something simple to experience, and after it generalized, metaphysical generalized. So it's just a suggestion following the historical evolution of his thought, and through the Harvard lectures too. And the second sense, the second question you posed, I actually think, so I agree with you. I think at solidarity, I always think to solidarity starting from the Wirklichkeit, because I always study Hegel until now. And so this is my, I could say, my filter. And so from here, I attain this suggestion, but I'm going to test with all you today. And so we will see. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I've got time probably for one more question, if there's one out there. Okay. Well, let's thank Alessia one more time for her grace under pressure and sharing her ideas. We're very thankful to have you with us. I think we need to start getting an Italian translation of the critical edition going. So we've got so many good Italians working on Whitehead right now that hopefully you maybe all could get together and decide how to divide up the labor of starting on an Italian translation of the edition. So in all seriousness, if there's interest over there, let us know. We'd love to
to talk to you about that. So thanks again for being here with us today.
Thank you, Brian.